Welcome to your irreverent show, Still Uncaptured, with me, Khomotso Matsunyane.
And me, Undumiso Wakangcobo Iqadi, lasemaqadini eHammersdale.
I have to suffer through this every fucking week.
I watched the show.
Every fucking week.
I watched the show.
I have to hear this Takazelo, Shaka Zulu.
I want to know where's the subtitles. I don't know what the hell he's
There
saying.
is no such historical figure, Shaka Zulu. You know he never existed.
There's
Right?
Ushaka Senzangakona son, because there were no surnames, as we've discussed. In any case, Robbie, a lot has been going on. You're our guest today, Robbie Thorpe. He's an old friend, old collaborator. Well, maybe not so old. Otherwise, I'm pacing myself. Welcome to the show, first of all.
Thank you. So excited
and thank
to be
you
here.
for agreeing to be here. So a lot of things have been going on through my mind. Part of the reason why I invited you is because you're a great rock hunter and you can have a conversation about, quite frankly, anything in the world. You're one of the most brilliant people I know. You're an excellent producer, amazing nurturer, but most importantly, an amazing patriot. So I thought if we're going to have this conversation, then I feel safe in having it with you. Say, for example, versus AfriForum or Solidaridad.
I was just sharing before the show started how Eusebius Makaiser and I thought it was a brilliant idea, and we pitched this idea to Nolin Maolwana Sango that we want to have this particular, and we were having this conversation with David Roth. Oh my goodness, it was a disaster. So I think we'll get a far better conversation with you.
Yeah, okay.
Because I think one of the most basic things about you since I've known you, and I've known you, and you probably don't realize this, almost 20 years.
No, I know.
It's been a
It's
while.
a long time.
Is that you are fundamentally honest.
Yeah.
You are one of those people that when you say something to me, I know. I remember one time I was wearing a K-Way jacket and Robbie was just like, "You're wearing a K-Way jacket and you live in fucking Boxburg. What's wrong with you?"
Why do people in Boxburg not wear K-Way jackets?
Yeah. So before we get started, I want to ask you guys a question because I watched the show, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have like really bright guests speaking on very weighty subjects, giving people real fantastic life advice.
Yeah.
And then you've got me. So which guest turned you down at the last moment?
In fact, we had asked Cyril Ramaphosa to come, but he was not available.
Yeah, no, okay,
So
well, I
we
accept
settled
that.
for
Yeah,
you.
that's okay then. That's
But
okay.
part of why I've been thinking about you and why I wanted to have this conversation is because, as we know right now, Donald Trump is the president of the United States of America. And the vice president is a South African, Elon Musk.
You keep on saying the vice president is Elon Musk.
Well,
Am I lying?
yeah.
He is de facto.
Fine, de facto.
But JD Vance believes he's the vice president.
JD believes he is, but we know who the real one is.
Yeah.
He's South African. I'm certainly not proud of him because he's problematic. So I've been watching in the news how Donald Trump is going for South Africa, saying that white people, the things that are happening in South Africa, terrible, very bad, very bad.
Terrible. Terrible
We're
things.
taking your land. We are raping your daughters. Like we're killing you on the farms. You know, the conversation that's been going on. The DA has been to a conversation in the United States, in Washington, D.C. to be specific. They came back and all of these things are happening at the same time. So it's no coincidence. So I'm sitting there thinking, Etu Brute, how did we get here? I was shocked. Ndumiso wasn't, and he'll tell you his reasons. I was shocked because I thought, after 31 years, we've gone somewhere. We have, I think, as Black South Africans, shown a ridiculous amount of grace and extended it to white people to say, we understand what happened historically over the past few decades. I'm not going to personally hold you responsible for it. And guess what? We can coexist. But there doesn't seem to be the same kind of grace extended back.
There's no
Reciprocity.
whatever the word is.
Reciprocity.
Reciprocity.
Yes. This is why we
No,
have
no,
a white
I'm-
guy
yeah.
here.
There's no reciprocity. And you use the word that white people have been, it's not ungrateful, but that's one of the words.
Okay, I might as well, I'll probably find it if I just use 30 seconds to say it. It's like, white people have, and it goes back to that word reciprocal, as in the entire reconciliation process seems to have been black people's burdens, but white people have just kind of been just like, okay, so you want to, of course we're superior, of course you want to be with us, but we don't really want to be with you. And that's, I think that fundamentally the average, and maybe not so average, but most black people feel that way. Is that do I capture
in context,
it?
that's the context.
Yeah.
For this particular conversation. I'm just curious, your first thoughts.
And we love our white people.
I mean,
black people love white people.
We really do.
We really do.
well, so that's complex.
I know. I know.
So the only way to answer these questions is to go back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because this is just another moment, right? So you have to go back. So I, just to be clear, I don't speak for white people. I don't have sort of a Thursday evening where I hang out with white people and get to understand them. So I speak only from my own experience. And growing up in peak apartheid, I think, is quite a classical experience, right? So for my own experience, I think the key thing for me was, first of all, I didn't even know, in the San Mati, I didn't even know that black people were the majority until I was probably 10 years old. And I was shocked.
But that makes sense, though.
Because my world was completely white, right?
Edenvale.
That makes sense.
Edenvale, but lots of people lived in little white bubbles. The only people we interacted with were essentially slaves. I mean, there were people that were having a very bad time. They got hardly, some people worked 7 days a week. I mean, the conditions that servants had at that time was really appalling. I mean, really was a step or two above slavery, right? There weren't a lot of black men at all. We didn't really see black men. Sometimes they were gardener. Often they weren't even from South Africa. There was the Malawians seemed to have some kind of hold on the gardening.
That was a big thing back in the day. Malawians.
Malawian houseboy.
Houseboys. Yeah.
They were forced
on
to wear
bicycles.
They were forced to wear those silly little uniforms. They were called boys, right? They were infantilized. You might have to do the
infantilized.
She knows all the big words.
Yeah. So there's all this stuff going on, and at the same time, your environment, the people you trust, your parents. So in my case, your parents, your teachers. Not in my case, but in other people's cases, the priests. If God is telling you, no, this is cool. This is black people are happy. Whatever the shit they're filling your minds with, you're getting it from authority. Coming from a place of people you trust. And the information that is being given is really important to understand, right? So I'll give you an example. My father always used to say, women can't drive. And every time a woman in the traffic did something wrong, he'd point it out. See, look, he wouldn't point out the men doing shit, but every time. And so you let me give you a better example. Let me give you a racial example, right? So I remember as a kid being on the beach and noticing that there were no black people on the beach. I don't know how old I was. And I said to my mother, why are there no black people on the beach? And she said to me, no, black people don't like swimming. Right? No. I'm sorry. Yeah, no. Hold on. It gets worse. It gets worse, right? Because now, cut to I'm an adult. Now I'm walking on, this is probably early 90s, our stuff has changed. I'm walking onto the beach and there's a black lifesaver. Now I'm going, I'm watching this guy dive into the sea and this guy can swim like a mofo. I'm going, this is a surprise to me. And then I'm going, why the fuck is this a surprise to you? What are you so surprised about? And then you're going, oh yeah, because all of these years, I never questioned that piece of information that my mother gave me about black people don't like to swim. So I've held on to this thing. And how, to your point, as you've just illustrated, what an unbelievably ridiculous concept to hold on to. So now I know I'm not a reliable person when it comes to race. What are the other things? What are the other prejudices that I've got? What are the other things that I'm holding on to that are not helping me assess any situation that I'm in? This is a problem. I can't even trust myself.
Right.
And that stuff mean? So what are we told? What are the really ugly things we're told? Yeah, okay, you're superior, but there's degrees of that, and some of it's really awful. It's dehumanizing, right? The only way that you can accept what you're doing to other people is to dehumanize them. It's okay because they're not really like us. They're not people.
They don't feel pain as much.
They don't, all of that stuff. It's the only way that you can live with yourself. Because if you're going, they're just like us, then then all other questions flow from that. So there's a lot of dark residues of stuff from that. But also things like, by the way, if black people get into power, they'll fuck everything up, right? Now, if you just think of that one idea, just think of the damage of that one idea.
Yeah.
Just that one idea, right?
Yeah.
So when black people get into power, what are you doing? You like my father. You are looking for all the moments that are not going well. And subconsciously...
And we have a lot of those.
Yeah, because that's life. Right. Mm-hmm. But subconsciously, what you're doing is you contributing to the dysfunction and the fact that it's not being successful because you're pleased by the fact that you see they are fucking it up. They were right. We don't have to feel bad. We didn't do anything wrong.
Because see.
It's exactly what we said would happen. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of stuff. I don't know if that answers any question, but it comes back to the idea. So then it's about... I think, if you ask me, even in myself, it's about a deep-seated sense that you have done something, you've participated in something terrible. And you feel bad. And I'm not just describing white guilt. I'm describing on a deep psychological level that the only way you can deal with this stuff is to somehow undo it. So when you get a fascist comes to power somewhere in America, and it comes on the ticket of, you know what? You don't have to feel bad if you're a misogynist or you're homophobic or you're a racist, because those things are just there to make you feel bad. That's the only point of them. Now, when the most powerful man in the world is giving you that carte blanche to go, okay, I can go full-bodied, I can release my prejudice into the world.
I don't have to apologize for being
I don't have to apologize. I don't have to feel bad.
In fact, you can be proud of your prejudices. And you can call people woke, which has become like a 4-letter word now, right? Way to sort of, it's the woke people. Very interesting that the same things that the Vice President Elon Musk is crying for, opening up Twitter to open up conversation and to make sure that everybody has a chance to speak.
Freedom of speech,
except when it comes to them.
Because they don't want to have to deal with what they really are, which is fascists. They're fascists, right? I mean, it's the fascist playbook to a T. Everything they do.
101, actually.
101.
But then,
I'm one of those stupid people who have actually read Mein Kampf. Adolf Hitler's memoir.
You better be better than me. I never read it.
I subjected myself to that shit.
Yeah.
And now that I'm actually thinking, where is my copy of Mein Kampf? Because I actually do want to read it again, because there's a lot of things that Donald Trump is doing right now. And I'm like, I remember Hitler saying this.
No, exactly.
I remember.
You're trying to erase everything about all the achievements of people that aren't white. You're trying to erase it. For example, the Naval Headquarters Library in America, they took out Toni Morrison, but they left Mein Kampf in the library. You can still go and get it. So maybe you can get it from them.
No, I have it in storage somewhere. I bought it, I remember, in the 90s,
But see, this is the same kind of people, though, after having said all of that. And I don't think white people understand how aggravating it is to hear somebody say, but I don't see color.
Yeah, no.
I don't see color. It's like we grew up in the same generation. Every time I see you, I see a white guy.
Yeah.
You're one of my favorite people in the world.
Yeah.
But there's never a time where I see you where I don't see my friend White Robbie. Do you understand? I can't help it. It's just what I see. I see you. I see a black man.
But after about 20 minutes of being with Robbie, you always forget it, don't you?
Yes.
Because now all you can see is him.
Because then we're talking as human beings.
As human beings, right? But when you are confronted with it, because what you've actually done is, it makes me realize why you are not your typical 702 caller. don't see color, purple, blue. The moment someone calls on the radio and talks about human colors that don't exist, all I can hear is, you racist. You start saying people, what purple people, blue people?
Well,
I don't see color.
This inspired you to write a whole book.
Yeah.
Some of my best friends are white.
Yeah, great book, which I read before I ever met you.
Didn't I give it to you?
You might have.
I definitely did.
No, it's a good book.
Yes.
Because, in that moment, when I heard I was going to be on the show, I thought, let me find your book and remember it. And of course, I couldn't find it because why? Because, your good books, you always give to somebody and
else.
they never bloody bring them back.
Right.
But also some of my best friends are white for a couple of years. And this will be borne out by people at Exclusive Books, was the most stolen book from Exclusive Books.
Fantastic.
Like people, because it was so tiny.
Yes, this is why you're starving.
This is why I'm not rich.
This is why people should have bought the book so your children can have something to look forward to.
Even in libraries, some of my best friends are white. Thank God that almost 20 years later, it's still in print.
Yeah.
So libraries can replace it. But every time they've got 2 copies, they disappear.
Okay, but I want to go back to
Anyway,
Robbie
some
now.
of my best friends are white. Yeah.
So we talked about some of my personal life.
Yes,
so I'm
yeah.
curious as to, you're growing up in Edenvale.
Yeah.
You write a lot.
Yeah.
And you're a performer of some of your works.
Yeah.
And a lot of your work is very biographical.
Yeah.
Because Edenvale had a profound imprint on your mind. What are some of those highlights? For example, I didn't realize that, for example, there was a demarcation from the English-speaking to the Afrikaans-speaking people in Edenvale.
Yeah, I mean, geez, Edenvale, that's a hell of a thing. But for, I guess personally for me, in this bubble that I lived in, from a really young age, I automatically identified myself as different from others, but I couldn't tell you why. I didn't feel like I didn't feel like I belonged. I just felt like I'm an outsider. And at some point in time, I started to realize that the whole thing was bullshit. I mean, I remember very profoundly Martha, the woman who worked for us, being picked up in a black
Domestic
Mariah.
worker.
Yeah, domestic worker.
Yes.
She had her pass. It was in the room, and they wouldn't let her even fetch her pass. You've heard this a million times.
Yeah.
But the dehumanization of throwing a granny, the granny, and throwing her in jail for a weekend and whatever. And I was, so she asked me to go and fetch her, get my papers, and so I ran into the room. When I come back, they'd taken her. So I'd sort of participated in her trauma a little bit, and it really upset me. And when I saw my parents were sort of dismissing it as like, oh, it's a bureaucratic thing, they picked up the wrong person. You know what I mean? It was a crack for me. I was like, wow, like this is not a caring thing. These people are not caring for each other in this moment. Because I had no politics. I had no way of accessing politics at all.
Not from Edenvale.
No, there was not. I mean, later on at school, they used to call me a communist. And the first time they called me a communist, I didn't even know what a communist was. But I knew that it sounded kind of dangerous. And I thought, okay, that's cool. I'll be a communist. But I couldn't ask a communist about communism, or I couldn't read about communism. So for me, it was just like the more of a hard time I give them, the more questions I ask them, the more, I'll be a communist, Anyway.
A commie bastard.
Yeah, exactly. But in Edenvale, I mean, so because there wasn't a sense of, as I say, black people were servants, they weren't allowed to even be around, or unless they, there's all that shit. Everybody knows the story, right? Massive injustice, right? But so all we had was other white people and the Afrikaners who were much poorer than us because they all worked for government. The very successful affirmative action stuff really worked. So in Edenvale, there was a big municipality, and all the government housing was in a certain part of town. So they all lived in that part of town, and we lived in Edenvale was slightly different because there was a majority English. Usually those East Rand towns were mostly Afrikaans.
Right next door to Boksburg, by the way.
Yeah, not quite next door, but close enough. But close, Boksburg had mines. Edenvale had nothing. Edenvale was like a weird place because there was it was the dynamite factory, actually. The Modderfontein dynamite factory was the start of Edenvale. But they were much harder than us, right? They were scary. We were scared of them, right? I mean, they didn't wear shoes and socks and shoes to school.
Well, they
It was
still don't.
like that was
They
like
still don't, you said?
No, in Prapan.
that was like a part of the uniform was no shoes. It was
Mhm.
like, wow. Like you're setting these guys up for what, right? They were much more prepared for war than we ever were, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, that there was always those tensions of trying to understand it. I was always naturally gravitated. So I was fighting the system in a completely different way because I sensed that this system, like I started to realize, fuck, they're lying to us about everything. And how do I, you know, so I was fighting the system, but as a coward, right? Because I wasn't brave in any way. So my way of fighting the system was, you know, if they said don't use any paper clips, I would use too many, you know, or whatever it was. But in my mind,
rebel,
but in my mind, I was just always like whatever I could do to, in my own mind, to fight the system, which was basically very little.
Yeah.
But that was a, you know, I was rebellious, and for me, particularly at school, I had some great victories. I latched onto this little kid called Paul Siebert, who was really the most fascinating human I ever met. Because
Is he the one who doesn't give a F about anything?
he did not give a fuck about anything. This guy was my hero. Like he genuinely, people say they don't give a fuck. This guy just, and nobody knew how to handle him. So I was his apprentice because I just thought this guy, and we had some great victories. I mean, we once accidentally got the headmaster of the school fired. You want to hear that story?
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with what we're talking about.
It doesn't matter.
But anyway,
It's a beautiful story.
yeah, it's a great story. So there was a point in time when you can imagine where the sort of system started, you know, after 76, the system started to feel a little shaken,
Right.
you know, and things started to be a little different.
And you were in high school then? What primary?
I was just in the beginning of high school.
Up in high school.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And there started to be a lot of bomb scares. So at school, we would
I
have
remember that.
became like, you know, what they would call trending bomb scares. Bomb scares
Right.
were trending, right?
Right.
So at school, like fairly regularly, like once a month, there was a bomb scare, but there was never a bomb, right? So everybody would just march onto the hockey field or whatever, and no one took it quite seriously. There was even a special way the bell would ring, you know, so that we all knew, oh shit, there's a bomb scare, and everybody it was a joy because you got out of class, right? So Paul Siebert and me, we had a biology test or geography test or maths test or something we didn't want to do, right? Me and Paul Siebert broke the school record, by the way, for bunking, which they only discovered at the end of the year. It was something like 65 days that we actually never turned up.
Truancy.
Yeah, truancy. Anyway, so Paul Siebert said, listen, man, why don't we call in a bomb scare? On Friday when it's the geography, maths, biology test, let's call in a bomb scare. And then we don't have to study. We can mess around for the rest of the week. So I said to him, but we can't call it in. He says, no, listen, man, I've got a cousin, Frick. I changed everybody's names.
Yeah.
And Frick will definitely do it. Anyway, he came back the next day, said, listen, a little bit of bad news. Frick wants 200 Rand. Now, in those days, 200 Rand,
bucks.
that was a lot of money. But he said, I've got a plan. We've just, this is a true story, we've just got this dog. And let me tell you, I can't remember how he got the dog. But this dog is unbelievably fucking fast. This is I'm not shitting you, this is the fastest dog I've ever seen. So what we do is we arrange a dog race. Everybody puts in 20 Rand and they bring their dogs to the park and we have a dog race, right? And that's and I said, okay, well, he's never going to get that together. So I'm just going to study the geography, right? While he's doing that. True's God. There we are in the park with 10 people with their dogs, right? And I'm looking at Paul Siebert's dog, and this dog looks like shit. And I'm thinking, fuck, we've lost our 20 Rand, right? There's one dog that looks like it's got a bit of a whippet in it. There's another guy's got a poodle. I mean, like, who brings a poodle to a dog race? Right? Anyway, so the plan was we stand on this side and the owner stands on that side, and you let your dog go, and then whoever the dog arrives at the owner first wins, right? So I was totally wrong about Paul Siebert's dog, by the way.
Yeah.
Because it was fucking fast. Just not in the right direction. So you know the Monty Python, the 100 meters race for men with no sense of direction. So the dogs just go in every direction, right? And the poodle wins. The poodle is the obedient poodle, is the dog that runs to the owner's arm. Anyway, so that didn't work. Paul Siebert comes back and says, listen, it's okay. Frick is going to let us pay him off. He's going to do it for us.
And it's
He's going to call in the bomb scare,
Okay.
right? So, sorry, I took a bit of a detour there, but it's, part of the story. Anyway, so we're sitting there, they're handing out the geography, history, biology test, whatever it is, and nothing's happening. And I'm going, why do I always do this to myself? Why didn't I just study? Anyway, the bell goes. Fucking thank God.
There's a bomb scare. But now I'm looking and I see that the teachers are being a bit weird because they're like looking actually a bit nervous. Like they like really are taking it seriously, which they never normally do. So I thought that's weird. Anyway, we march onto the hockey field, and the hockey field looks down on the admin building. The next minute, the whole school is standing on the hockey field. The headmaster comes running out of the admin building like a bullet, jumps into his car and leaves. Now, what had happened is the headmaster had been sleeping with the geography biology maths teacher. And her husband had found out.
Ooh.
And the husband had threatened the headmaster. And that morning, unconnected to anything, a package had arrived with the headmaster's name at the school and was sitting in the entrance hall.
And then there's a bomb scare.
And there's a bomb scare. And he assumed, oh my God, this is a real bomb and it's for me. And anyway, so the whole story came out and he was fired.
He was fired.
Yeah, he was fired.
Because of the
He's sleeping with
infidelity,
the geography teacher.
Okay, just to show you how much attention I give to the story. So it wasn't Frick. Frick hadn't called.
No, Frick called.
No, he did call.
He did call, but also
there happens
on
to
top
be
of it.
that-
Sorry, I've gone completely off topic. You can cut that bit out.
That's right.
I'm doing writing, by the way, Substack, if anybody's interested. I tell all the stories. Where were we? I derailed the
You
whole
tell
thing.
very good stories on Substack.
But also, I think that for me, what's interesting is two things that you were talking about right there. Is that you're talking about the fact that you've always felt like an outsider, right? And what's interesting is that the last recording that we did when we shot this series, we're talking to Zek, who, by the way, if you read his biography, his memoir, it is, what is it called? Sometimes there's a void, and then it says a memoir of an outsider, because that's also how I've always felt, and I suspect that you felt that same way. Because the things that you and I talk about also with our own people, like I am ill-equipped to talk for Black people because I don't know, I've always just felt like an outsider. But the second thing is that you're talking about bomb scares, and it actually reminds us, and I think it's taking us back to the conversation we're having, which was there was once an armed struggle in this country.
Yeah.
And your story illustrates how flippin' effective it was, because we always say it's like, I am gay though.
Right.
Those
we
toy
say that, but
soldiers.
at the time,
they
it
were
was
very
a real
effective.
Real thing.
It was a
Right.
real thing.
effective.
Even the 76 uprising had a hell of an effect on
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's get back to because I feel like you've got this frustration
What?
about the
doesn't.
situation now with white people.
Oh, that.
and
yes.
so
I'm trying
mean,
to figure out.
I've got past the point of, because I spent my life being embarrassed. I mean, I've had family members that, I've had to confront, and I've been embarrassed generally by white people. But, it's been a journey of stuff, and I've kind of got out the other side and gone, don't expect anything because it's not going to change. It can't change. And, there's many ways to look at things. And privilege is a problem for everybody, right? In the sense that, of course, you want to be the privileged, but the privileged also lose every kind of possible insight that you would want them to have because they're not confronted by the things that you'd like. First of all, I don't have Black friends, right? They don't have, or if they have, and if they're interacting with people, those people often don't feel like they can be honest with them because there's a power dynamic or whatever, right? So their privilege is, it stops their kind of spiritual evolution or allowing them to become better people. They're stunted. They can't.
But what does that... And I'm sorry to cut in.
No,
I'm so eager to ask you this question, right?
Yeah.
Because the question that I have is, earlier you were talking about Edenvale and about the fact that there was a particular bubble. Now, and you were talking about it historically, purely because you were telling us a story from way back when you were young. Do those bubbles still exist? Because my sense of it is that white people have just remained in these bubbles. Nothing has happened to white people for the past 30 years. They just remain in these bubbles, and that it's okay. They might have a little bit more information because, they're on social media, and now and then they'll go on an excursion into Alex, which is a very interesting preposition, and so on. But these bubbles, do white people in the large in South Africa still live in these bubbles?
I mean, I assume so. I mean, I'd imagine so.
Yeah.
But I mean, look, let's be honest. Everybody lives in some form of bubble.
Of course.
And if you look at, I'll tell you what's quite damning, I think. So, I've always been very interested in notions of social justice because I've lived a life in where I've witnessed an enormous amount of social injustice. But very early on, I became disillusioned with like hard politics because for me, politics has never seemed to make anybody happy. If politics made somebody happy, it was for a very brief period of time. Tell me an example of where there was this place in which everybody was so happy with their politicians and everything they were doing. And I always thought it was something. So I got my politics, to finish the story of my child, from music. Bob Marley. Bob Marley was the biggest influence on me. Bob Marley, and there was a guy that I worked with at the hardware store, Rasta, who changed my life because he introduced me to Bob Marley and Muhammad Ali. He would quote Muhammad Ali all the time, and it was a voice of authority, of a self-realized man speaking very clearly about stuff in a very sharp way.
Unafraid.
All of those things I could hear. Anyway, I'm digressing. But so if you look at our politics, right? So I've always been suspicious of politics and of politicians, to be honest. And if you look at our politics, if you take the first election we ever had, right? And you go 72% for the ANC, something around there.
No, it was 60 actually.
Was it? Okay, but in a range. Let's say in a range. If it was 60, that's fine. But in a range between 60 and 70% of people on that side, and 19 to 25 maybe on the DA, whatever they were called. Were they called the DA?
NP.
There was actually the National Party.
Was that? Yeah, but they were all the same thing, right? Same thing. And if you look at politics now, it breaks down in exactly the same way. So you've got the EFF. What's their home? Their spiritual home, if you like. For if you want to argue about their kind of ideology, which I would argue, I don't know for sure, but some people might. Ideologically, their home is the ANC, and of course Zuma's party as well. They've added some elements like cult of personality, and you'll have etc. But it's the same thing, right? Nobody's gone, and the DA have amazingly kept people who aren't white in that fold. I mean, I find that fairly fascinating because, wow, it must take some contortions to do that. But you can see they've stubbornly refused to do what they could very easily have done. They've had opportunities. They've had Musi Maimane and other moments in which they could actually have become...
Lindiwe Mazibuko.
Pumzile van Dam.
So many opportunities.
Balintuli, I am such a stan. Balintuli's got a brilliant mind.
So you eventually have to draw the conclusion that it's because they don't want to, right? It's because they don't feel comfortable with black people in authority. That's the bottom line. It has to be something. I mean, I don't know what other explanation for it is.
But what's interesting is that Helen Ziller is the first person to love to kiss black people on the lips.
Yes.
So you've got this thing
Oh wow,
where
that's very specific.
that is very, because it's true.
Oh no, there are so
the
many.
kiss of death, I call it.
Joseremane.
Joseph
Mampela
I mean,
Ramphele.
Pela,
that is-
Lindo Masibuku, to be honest, as well.
God, the
quite a
psychology
few.
of that is so heavy.
quite Musimaimani.
Musimaimani.
There isn't a black that the DA has pushed whom Helen Ziller has not kissed on the lips. The same Helen Ziller who a few weeks ago went to the United States to put the case for white South Africa.
Oh, for God's
Do you understand? So you can kiss us on the lips. And this is how it messes with my mind, how white South Africans think, to say, so you can prove you're not racist by kissing a black person on the lips. But the truth of the matter is, you can't also bear for those same people to come and live next to you.
You can wear traditional Xhosa garb.
You can speak Xhosa.
And on top of a three-legged pot, and say, "Where mam dlamini,
Yes.
lupum komboti," and therefore it absolves you.
You
of
can sing all of Brenda Fassie's lyrics.
Yes.
And yet fundamentally, deep down inside, you feel that black people should be grateful to white people.
But you saw through this very long ago. I don't know why you're on this now because
No,
you
but
saw,
this is the thing
you
that I was saying to her.
you
Like, why
saw
is she
through
so
this-
surprised?
You saw through
Call
this.
me an optimist.
You saw this 20 years ago. I mean, this is not new. You're not dealing with any new information.
So
here.
call me Cyril Ramaphosa, but I'm constantly shocked. South Africa shocks me all the time. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's because I'm an eternal optimist or I'm an idiot. But there are things that people do that I just find,
But
You did that?
But so let me get back to the point that I was making,
Yeah.
which is that our politics is really race-based politics.
yes.
So you have the ANC goes through lots of phases. You have the revolutionaries where there is ideology, where these guys really believe in the stuff, like really profoundly believe in it, right? They believe they can change the world. But
I think Joe Nesisenze actually really believes it, eh? He's one of those few guys that I've just.
But at that time, they all believed it. They spent lots of, I mean, you spent 26 years in jail for a thing. There's very few people in the world that would do that. Very,
Very
very.
few.
How many of the politicians around today do you think would go to jail for 26 years for whatever? Not many. So I still, despite what anybody says, I still have great respect for anybody that ever took up arms for a cause that they made a great sacrifice. And look how they've been treated. They've been treated so badly, those people, right? And in the same way, I also understand that there were a lot of people on the other side that were also victims of shit that ended up having to fight in a way that they wouldn't necessarily have chosen. I get all of that. But the politics of South Africa, if you look at what's the difference between the ANC and the EFF, besides the fact that the guy is forced out, right? He takes the politics of the ANC, but he has one thing that frees him up. The ANC traditionally has this notion of non-racialism, right? This is how they've built the brand, if you like. Julius is free of this. So now what's his potent weapon? What am I going to do? What if the subtext of all of the policy is, I'm going to give white people a hard time. This is why he appeals, right? He appeals because I'm going to give them a hard time.
He pisses white people off.
I'm
he scares them.
I'm not scared of them.
Right.
They're not going to kiss me on the lips.
Right.
And I'm going to, and that's, if you boil it down, that is essentially the appeal of the EFF, which tells you black people are angry if this is because if he gets in charge of the country, my God, what else is he going to do? He's only got this one thing that they're kind of running on, yeah? Right? He wasn't. We can go into all the reasons of why it wasn't successful, and believe me, you'll have people on the show that know a lot more about this stuff than I do. And Zuma, to some degree, borrows that. He starts to eventually see the appeal of that to his core, adds a bit of Zulu nationalism into it. But essentially, it's also saying a similar thing. I'm going to give white people a harder time, or white people are not going to have it so easy if I ever get back into power, right?
I really want to hear more about this because I think you've just hit a beautiful vein. But let's do all of that after this. We just need to take a little bit of a water break and we'll be back. Still talking to Robbie Thorpe, humanist, and a friend of this particular show. Welcome back to Uncaptured. We are having an absolutely fascinating...
Still uncaptured.
Oh, still uncaptured.
Yes.
Take two.
But it's still uncaptured. Still uncaptured with Khumutso Matsunyane and myself, and of course, our friend Robbie Thorpe. You started taking us in the direction of, you just wanted us to just very specifically talk about the politics. Now, I was saying in one of the preparatory meetings that one of the things that's fascinating about South African politics is that practically everyone, every demographic in this country has at some point changed their minds about who they're voting for. So, for instance, you go to the Western Cape, first of all, the colored people, as a demographic in the Western Cape, they voted National Party. After a while, they were like, no, it's not working for us. So what did they do? They changed their minds. They voted for the ANC. Do you remember Noma India Mfeketo? At some point, our just erstwhile US ambassador, Ibrahim Rasool, was also the premier of the Western Cape, and Lynn Brown and whatever. In KZN, they voted for the IFP, and then they went ANC, and they've recently gone MK Party. Everyone has changed. The Indian vote at some point as a bloc went with the National Party, then GA, and then ANC, and so on. The only voting bloc in South Africa that has never changed its mind is the white voter.
Yeah.
The white voter has always just voted for the white party.
Yeah.
If it wasn't the National Party, which, by the way, just by assimilation, when they vote DA, it's basically the same continuation. When you sit there and again, and I'm speaking with you as an outsider, because you're talking about the politics, what do you attribute that to? White people loved Nelson Mandela, loved him, adored him, and so they never voted for the ANC ever. But that's another conversation, because that's a follow-up question about the whole othering of certain black people. But just speaking to white people as a bloc have always just voted white. What do you attribute that to? They've never changed their minds.
You're now asking a guy who's never voted for the DA why. I think...
Yeah.
So maybe the way into the answering, I don't know that I have some kind of earth-shattering answer to it. But I think maybe the way into the conversation, because you mentioned Mandela, what did Mandela represent?
Yeah.
So when I imagined in 1989 what was going to happen in this country, I'd always imagined that there'd be a moment. Do you remember that movie Frankenstein, where the villagers arrive with the burning torches to get Frankenstein?
Yeah.
I always remember that's what would happen to me, that eventually, black people would arrive with their flaming torches and say, okay, we're here for you, right? And
at that moment.
Yeah, it's time you paid, right? And I think in some ways, subconsciously, that thing was always there. Like, this has got to end badly, and there might be a price that we have to pay for all of the stuff that we've done. Whereas Mandela represents that kind of absolution of your sins. It's going, you might think you had to pay some terrible price, but it turns out that you didn't have to. And, the mistake of that might have been, because I get you trying to start again, you're trying to find a middle ground. Of course, that was the right thing in my view. It was the only choice. Nobody had won a war. There was a whole very specific circumstance, which I think people forget. But anyway, of course, people just took that as, well, great, we're off the hook. We'll just carry on as usual. And I guess, in the beginning, what the National Party was saying is the only hope that we've got is that we've got to secure rights for the minority, right? We've got to make sure that our identities don't get swamped. All that nonsense, all of that stuff, which was counter to any idea of nation building or any idea of, you've got to give something up. Yeah. You've got to make space for other people. A lot of the problems that we have now is because no space was made in the private sector for black people, right? So where the only space there was in government. And so you can see the pressure on that money, because that's the source of wealth that all of these people have.
That is so true.
And the expectation of that, what that means, is incredible, right? Whereas private sector really hasn't made the space that if they had made more space, maybe we would have been in a different circumstance.
Yeah. And so basically what you're saying is there was reluctance and almost very deliberate opposition to the national project, because that was the days when we had Rainbow Nation, but Rainbow Nation wasn't rainbowing quite so well anywhere else in the country, because people stayed, because you're responding to a question about why people have been so intransigent, like they've just not moved. It's just always been the same, because that is when the private sector should have been able to say, come on, let's, diversity.
But what you also mentioned is quite interesting. Robbie did a film, a documentary,
Yes.
The Dust on Our Feet, which was questioning what makes me South African as a Mlungu.
Yes.
So I want to ask you that question now in 2025.
It was inspired by Mbekki's famous speech.
I'm an African.
And then F.W. de Klerk stood up and said, I'm also an African, and fucked the whole thing up. So the question...
But that's an interesting question, though.
Yeah.
The answer to that question. But when you're done, was FW an African?
Yeah, so let me answer it this way, because that was the question I asked myself. So as a white person, am I an African? Right?
Yes.
Now, I'm not just a white person. My ancestry is English, right? So English-speaking white South African. We don't even have a name for ourselves, whereas the Afrikaners, which means African. Afrikaner means African. Have made some attempt, you can see, to have some kind of African identity, where my people not at all, right?
Yeah.
So I would even argue that I'm even further away from the naturally being able to understand my African identity than an Afrikaans person, right? So I mean, I started off by going to find somebody who had some kind of greater sense of Africanness, and we ended up having a whole journey with Lundi, who was a
white Sangoma.
A white Sangoma.
Yes,
so I thought she's a white, and I went to her and I said, "Listen, will you be in my film?" And she said, "No, not interested." I said, "Please." I explained why I was trying to do it, and she said, "Okay, listen, we'll throw the bones and see what the ancestors say." Oh my God, do you remember this?
Mm-hmm.
So the ancestors threw my bones. My ancestors said, "Dude, there's a curse. We're very upset with you. You have never contacted us." It was a shit show. So then I ended up in a freezing cold night in a chicken bath, naked in a chicken bath, rubbing myself with chicken. No, they went back through the bones.
Yeah.
What is a chicken bath? Sorry.
It's like you slaughter a chicken and you put it in the bath.
And then you take certain parts of it and then you mix it with the water. And then you pour it over. No, you don't drink it. But
Ingingila, like, so what the parts?
Yes.
Then I went back and they said, no, it didn't work. Now I have to go and bury my luck at midnight in the graveyard. So I did that. No, sorry, it didn't work. Now I have to have cats. Have the cats. Oh, sorry, it didn't work. Now I have to do this. Now I've got to go and vomit in an ant-heap. Have you ever tried to be ready to vomit and be at the ant-heap? Anyway, I
have. It's horrible.
I went to do this whole thing, which I just honored as part of a journey of trying to understand, like, these are my ancestors and this is what they're telling me to do. Anyway, so I went through an entire journey of trying to understand, is this a thing? What does it mean? What is it about identity? And I came out with no answer that is profound in any other way, other than I think people that are not interested in the environment that they are existing in a holistic way are really in danger, that environment might become hostile to them at some point. And I guess that is kind of what's happening, right?
Because I mean, I think that all three of us are smart enough to see the inevitability of that Frankenstein moment when the villagers come with the torches. At some point, one of the, I don't want to misquote a revolutionary, but one of the revolutionaries said, behold, at some point, the have-nots are just going to come for the haves. So it's going to happen. And when that happens, Khomutso and I, who are sort of lower middle-class black people, also understand that we will also be...
We're in the line of fire.
We are in the line of fire. It's going to happen, right?
Well, I mean, I don't know that anything is inevitable because...
Yeah.
I'll tell you
what. Well, if the status quo persists.
Yeah, but even then, I'll tell you, because here's the interesting thing, right?
Yeah.
What happens is that people lose faith in politics, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what happens. People realize, man, we're doing this stuff and our lives just don't change.
Mm.
And this person tells us this thing, this person tells us that thing, but our lives just stay the same.
Yeah.
And that's true in this environment, and to some weird degree, it's true in America too, because what the Americans are witnessing, even though the wealthiest country in the world, that the elites are prospering and working people are having shit lives, right?
Yep.
They don't have medical aid, all that stuff, right? So what happens is that somebody comes along and says, you know what? I'll make you great again. I'll make you powerful again. I'll make you... And it's the idea of power as an abstract concept. We'll give you back your dignity. You'll be powerful people again. All of those languages,
which is more about the brand of the United States of America.
But I think there's political parties here who use language like that. If you look carefully, and I think that is essentially where fascism takes root. Because what are you saying? Democracy doesn't help you. Democracy is no use. Freedom of speech, what does that help you? All of those things that actually are necessary for those people to get get their hands around the throat of the country. They have to,
and that poses a real danger when people like me, even it's like, what's the point of voting?
Yeah,
do you understand? I question. I'm able to vote. I have all these rights. We're able to get on these podcasts and talk about whatever we want and criticize anybody that we want in government. But what's the real point when I don't have medical aid?
Yeah.
When I cannot afford to take my children to school?
When your human rights cannot assure you of a good life.
When 51% of your salary or more goes towards transport.
Yeah.
You've earned 5,000 rands, 2,000 and a half must go towards transport.
No,
that is unsustainable in the long run, where people are going to say, genoeg is genoeg.
So here's my question about that. Now that you're talking about that. Okay, so I'm going to put a proposition to you, and I'm going to say, both of you, I'm going to say to you, white people as a group, the 7.3% of white people
somewhere there
in South Africa,
especially after the refugee status in the United States,
as a bloc, if they were to be united, have got enough resources to actually sort out the shit that we're in. They possess it. If white people were to say, we're going to cede our privilege, this is against human nature. Humans don't cede.
Yeah.
They don't cede privilege if they have it, right? But my point there being that, but if white people actually just came to that particular party where they just decided, you know what, we'll give back whatever land, we'll keep some. Can we be fair, guys? Even if 7% of white people were to say, well, we'll keep 20% of the land and just give all of it away, it would help alleviate a whole lot of social problems. I'm very fascinated by the intransigence. What is keeping white people from, you were talking about identity just earlier on. If I sent you to Germany tomorrow and I said to you, go live in Germany, how long do you suppose it will take you before you are speaking fluent German? 2 years? 3 years. You'd be speaking German, right?
Yeah.
What has kept white South Africans who live here, who have got the resources and the wherewithal to actually make a huge dent and a big difference and live in a country where they don't speak the language spoken by 80% of the people? What is what is the psychology behind it in your understanding?
I mean, you're asking me a whole lot of questions here.
I know.
I mean,
we're having a conversation.
No, but the thing about, if I went to Germany and no one spoke English, I would learn German. I mean, you're picking on me, who's got no aptitude for language. In fact, don't even speak Afrikaans, and I learned that for 12 years. Right?
Yeah.
But if I had to speak German, then I would learn German, right?
Yeah.
But in South Africa, I don't have to speak. So
exactly.
So that's a horrible answer, but it's just an honest one. It's of course, people should learn. Of course, and I was always happy that my children would go to school where they would get the option to learn languages, and of course, the system was such a mess that it didn't work out like that, even when they had the opportunity.
Listen, this is an issue even black parents are facing.
Yeah, no, it's a whole thing.
So, myself included.
Yeah.
In terms of like whether your children even speak the language.
Yeah.
So if black people don't see the need to teach their own language to their own children, why would white people? Because everybody always speaks English or Afrikaans, right?
But sorry, your first point.
But
you were asking
but the question is about the reluctance.
Yeah. So the language thing is, I think, is slightly different from your original point. Yeah. Like, why can't you see that it could all, if there's enough space for everybody, for lack of a better way of putting it, right?
Yes.
Like, why don't we just all work out that there's enough space for everybody? And I just think, unfortunately, that you're a romantic, man. Like, that is such a beautifully romantic. That's why you're an artist. And that's why, if I ran the world, I would put the artists in charge of everything. Because I think what politics never gives us is creative solutions to anything, right? Politics,
imagination.
There's no imagination. Politics is such a blunt instrument. You know, where differences have been made, where somebody's gone into a community and they built some kind of house out of some kind of weird substance or something. It's come from a creative mind of some, and usually then the government will stop them from doing it because they, whatever, right? We know all of these things, but you know, there's a simple thing, and we can become obsessed with what white people are doing or what not doing, but you know, there's other people that have a lot of power to have done a lot of things that also haven't done stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of it's got to do with the greatest resource we have in this country, without a doubt, is its people. So why have we failed the people so badly? What is that thing where all we have to have given was people opportunity? Why we failed in that very basic way so spectacularly? And that isn't just the fault. I mean, it is certainly, it's a factor, but it's not just the fault of one people. And I have to say, I'll say something slightly shocking, but I do think that there's an element of politics in which politicians prefer people to be beholden to them and ignorant.
I agree with that. And I think that's part of the strategy of the current ruling party, however many they may be, and in terms of consolidating the GNU. They keep us away from books. Our education system is rubbish. Absolute rubbish, unless you can afford to take your kids to private school.
I'm starting to think it's actually deliberate. I actually believe that in the last 30 years,
it is absolutely deliberate.
It's almost conscious. They're consciously making sure no one reads.
So they make sure that we don't have a hunger for academia or for books or for reading. And they make sure that we're dependent on grants. And when you think of how ridiculously minimal that grant is, that's what kills me. For 350 rand, it's fuck all. It's nothing in the larger scheme of things. And yet, it saves people from starving to death. So it also makes a big impact. So I think it's deliberate. And I'm wondering if, I'm curious as to, for example, what's your relationship with D-STEM? There's a part where I feel like Codesa gave away too much.
Yeah, no, it did.
Where I just feel like you, Mandela, you went just one step too far. And D-STEM and the mixing of Nkosi Sigelela is one of those where I feel like you took a perfectly perfect anthem and your Hoi HD Blue Fun. I know it's not a popular way of looking at it. It's not reconciliatory, but I'm not feeling like that. I feel like those, the stem messes up our national anthem.
National anthem, yeah.
And that we should have left in Abu Magubenjalo.
I was about to say one of the proudest moments. I actually sat there and I had a tear down my eye, my one cheek, because in 2010 at the Apartheid Museum there was a TED Talk. I think it was a Soweto TED Talk.
Yeah.
And you were the compere, and you went up on stage, and I remember you saying to the audience, you said, "Guys, can we please rise to sing the original national anthem?" And you said, "And I don't mean the national anthem. I want us to sing Nkosi Sigelela." And everyone sang it and went Magube Njalo. And you insisted on Wozam, because they cut out the best part of Nkosi Sigelela Africa. And
Yes.
I was so proud of you that day.
Thank you,
my
my friend. Do you have a relationship with
No,
D-STEM?
I've always hated the stem. But I mean, I'm not a national anthem kind of guy, I'm sorry to say.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'd say this, because I heard a knock on the door, so I think we're wrapping up.
Yeah.
So
Well, this
that's right.
section anyway.
Yeah.
Let me just say this.
Mhm.
I think that, so let me apologize for the fact that Helen Zille went to see Trump's
Why are you
people.
apologizing?
No, hold on, let me make my point.
Okay, all right, sorry.
I'm sorry that people don't realize that actually that's a very self-destructive act. And there's an interesting thing about how self-destructive I think white people have been. Because actually you're not going to improve your circumstance. You're going to really make it worse. That's the bottom line. And the truth is, the only way we can make things better is by having a bigger sense of your place in the world, of the people with you that you're with, understanding how they see you and what their issues are. If you don't focus on those things, you aren't ever going to get to a place where you secure your own self in that environment, because you are going to be a part of the problem and not part of the solution. So I find that stuff very, really hard. I don't even want to really know that Helen Zille went to see. I didn't actually know that, because there's a part of me that can't handle that, the stupidity of it and how it affects me. And it also means that, when I walk into a room, I'm seen. I'm in some ways, people see me
There's
as
a
part
DA
of
member.
those people of that stuff, and that's hard. And it's just self-destructive.
Yeah, completely heard you. Hold that thought. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Still Uncaptured, and our guest today is filmmaker and thinker Robbie Thorpe. An old friend, an old good friend who, remember the Archie comics? I can't help it. I have to say this. I love saying this to him. But if you're my generation, you would have read my Archie comics. Yeah. And in the Archie comics, the stereotype that Robbie is Jughead. Remember Jughead? Yeah.
Jughead never got
He's
to go.
totally.
Do you know who? Nobody represented me per se in the Archie comics, but I identified with, was it Betty? The blonde.
The blonde.
I don't know why, because she was such a goody two shoes, and I wanted to be a goody two shoes. But who I really wanted to be was Veronica, because she was a bitch.
But you do have the teacher's pet vibe going on.
I did. And younger, I was insufferable. In any case, where are we picking up from?
So here's the thing, right? So we're talking. So if someone's been following this conversation, right, and we've just got a tongue lashing from the young people, including Vumisita, my son, who's watching this, and she's like, "You guys are just kind of like literally, it's like, you guys are boring, right? Anyway, so here's the question for both of you, right? It's like a kind of question which is, someone listening to us might think it's all doom and gloom. For instance, Donald J. Trump would listen to this and go, isn't this what I mean? That there's a problem here with black people and white people. From 1994, I will say this for myself, and this is where you guys come in. This is a significantly better country than it was in 1990 for me. As in, there are so many things that we are taking for granted so much, and that you walk around this country and you actually think, Robbie was just saying off here right now that I'm an optimist, and I think that this place we can sort it out, that the problems that we have can be fucking sorted out.
I would have to agree with you.
They truly can be. I'm free to do even this. You and I talking like this in the studio is a far cry from 1985, where you and I would not actually be able to do.
Yeah.
Do you feel that way about this country? Do you feel that way?
You go first.
No.
You don't. So you miss the days when you couldn't be in town after 6 p.m. You couldn't go to movies on Sunday. You couldn't.
You know what? We adapted. At the time, we didn't know any better, right? There's no movies on Sundays. You have to leave town by 5 o'clock. So you just kind of like went along with the process.
What was the projection for your life? How high what could you have done in 1989? He talked about 1989. In 1989, what was possible for you in 1989 versus now?
I went to a private school.
I know, but what was possible for you in 1989?
Oh, much less than is possible now, right? No, significantly, without a doubt. When we're talking about the enforcement of affirmative action in corporate spaces, and we know corporate would not have hired black people were it not for the necessities of affirmative action. You mentioned it earlier. They just couldn't be bothered. It does not make corporates money. So they don't like words like transformation. Helen Ziller hates that word, right? They don't want words such as that are about basically making the country better. So I'm kind of torn between, because I don't want to be the one, and I'm not going to ever be the person to say apartheid was better, because it was not.
Yes.
Apartheid was one of the most awful experiences of our lives. And we are paying the economic and political price of apartheid even now. The things that we're talking about, the leftover, hangover, apartheid and attitudes and mentality. So I would never be that black to say like apartheid was better, because it wasn't.
But you are still ambivalent about whether this is a better country. I'm not
ambivalent. I know for a fact that our leadership can do better. I know for a fact that us and as a nation are capable of better and can do better. And where we expect things to have been messed up, we expect them to be fixed and to move forward. We're not doing that. Tell me a case where people were actually, outside of Tony Hengeni, were actually convicted for corruption, where people had to, most importantly, 2% VAT, bring back the money that they stole from the state coffers. How about we take somebody to jail to show that, you know what, it's not just the 42% deal on your car, on your Mercedes-Benz. You have taken children's money. That money was meant to build toilets with working water. There's no toilets. There's no school. So we are capable of so much. And this current leadership, I think, does not have the balls to do what needs to be done to get the country to where it needs to be. And part of that is that with BEE and affirmative action, what our leaders agreed to was that they would be given a piece of the pie. It wasn't talking about all South Africans.
Of course it wasn't.
They were talking about themselves. So when they made those deals, Kobo Kodesa, in all those corridors of power, they were being already cut into the deal. And don't tell me the white people were not aware of this. Understanding that the world would not have allowed us to take revenge on white people. Do you see how Donald Trump is reacting right now? The world would have risen. They're like, don't kill the white people. Oh my God.
There would have been concerts in the park.
What's worrying me here now is she was considering it until she found that out. it's kind of like, by the way, I know where this white guy lives. So you'll be a soft target. Let's go and get him.
I expect so much better from us, man.
Do you, I mean, I think, okay, let's say this, right? And I don't want to put this on you, but I have to. But which is, I mean, when you actually think about it, logically, factually, all right, in any shape, form, and whatever, white people have had a much better quality of life since 1994 than before, right? Every economic indicator says the same thing.
I mean, that's a hard one to answer because, if you look at, for example, I can tell you what apartheid did for like my family, right?
Yeah.
Which is pretty incredible, actually. Whereas my father sold blankets, right? It was a rep, what they called a rep, right?
It says with a briefcase.
Yeah, I mean, he sold blankets.
Yeah.
And my mother was a nurse. And we lived on a half acre of land with a double garage. They both had cars. I mean, it was pretty astounding. Like, that's astounding level of stuff.
Of
and
opulence.
That really was,
opulence.
Yeah, and it was totally based on the fact that there was this free to cheap labor. Like, it was complete. So to say I would argue that was really, people were really well off. Everybody was guaranteed a job if you were white, right?
Yeah.
Like, to the point where I was the first person in my family to get a matric.
Yeah.
It made, like, there was no ambition. White people at my level of like lower middle class white people, there was no ambition. There's no reason to be ambitious. Everything was given to you, right? So people didn't read. Like, people were not that interested in the world because you didn't want to discover things that might make you feel uncomfortable.
It's going to rock the status quo.
So you were the biggest supporters of apartheid because my father was English. He came from England. This is the greatest thing that ever happened. He was from a working class family in England. Wow. Like, so, when no one said, hey, go and study. When you finish school, go and study. The only reason I studied after school was to stay out of the army because I knew I was never going to go to the army. If I studied, I'd get a bit of deferment.
Oh, you were a conscientious objector.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so like that was an incredible time, right? And until 76, there was no sense of any resistance, and even some period after 76, it never felt like you were in, like it was all going to fall down. It felt like the 1,000-year Reich. It would last forever. And, so I would really argue that
was better.
That was peak whiteness right there.
And I can imagine it's difficult to give up privilege. I'm assuming, because they won't give it up, I'm assuming it's hard to give it up, to just sort of like, okay, we were saying a little earlier, if you say like, okay, we'll give back some of your land.
Okay, but when you say, because let's try and unpack that. I hope the kids are enjoying this. But when you say, because you can bandy things around when you can say give up privilege, but what is meant, like, what is the plan for that stuff, right? Because I mean, it's a really difficult, like there's almost no example of society elevating at a mass level people out of poverty. It's an incredibly difficult thing to do. I mean, when you see things as a class system, then we've got skewed by race, right? Because that's made the difference. But essentially, all the problems, we have all the problems of class as well. So when you say give up privilege, what are you saying to people? Are you going to, what do you mean? Because it can be abstract, right?
Well,
be serious about affirmative action.
And for
that's
one,
a very good start.
Just even an admittance that, first of all, apartheid was bad and terrible.
Yeah.
I just to acknowledge that, like, oh, this was terrible. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Secondly,
that's
be like,
very easy.
I benefited.
That's not very demanding.
I don't think it is.
So how come it hasn't happened?
I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't understand.
And I'm not asking you this question because I'm putting it to you. I'm actually putting it to you as well because, the only thing that happens is that if we were sitting with Julius here, he would basically say, well, it's just because they're racist and they're prejudiced, right? And so on. But that's a simple answer, right? So what is it? Because it's a question that fascinates me, about, for instance, the TRC process where there was like this opportunity to say, okay, for this period from here to here, you guys can just, you are not going to be prosecuted. No.
And not just no with an arrogance of I don't owe you anything. And then instead of like I don't owe you anything, it also becomes that it's like, but that's not me. I didn't do any of that. That was my parents. Do you understand? Nobody would ever say like now we joke about you'd be hard pressed to find a white who voted for the National Party.
Yes.
It's as a joke.
It's very difficult actually.
Because people are now claiming just like, no, I did this. I was always nice to the white people. I mean, to the black people. Meanwhile, I remember very specific incidents of racism that came against kids my own age.
You could remember those yesterday as well. You don't have to go back to the past. But I mean, everybody in some way wants to be the hero of their own story. And a lot of the stuff is confronting. Like, I don't know that I have an answer in a mass kind of way but people don't, I mean, there's a hardcore of people who see themselves as racist and are somehow proud of it because they believe in a very hard version of that stuff. But most people wouldn't see themselves and they still want to be the hero of their story. So they're all trapped in their own dynamic. So I don't, it seems to me to have been a very small thing to have had some kind of road to Damascus moment where you go, oh my God, we were wrong. Why that didn't happen.
Remember,
I don't,
it's interesting.
I don't, and clearly it's a problem that it didn't happen. It might have been helpful to everybody, but it didn't happen. And maybe that was part of, as you say, too many things being given away, etc. But the other thing you talk about was affirmative action, which is true. Like we need to re-engineer our society. How do we do it? Incredibly difficult thing to do. On the top level, it's the easiest, right? Give people education, give them jobs, right? But actually, the application of affirmative action has been very badly bungled on the other side. Like the fact that Patrice Motsepe could still be an affirmative action. I mean, I could still put him down as my affirmative action partner on a business deal. That's
not just him, but him and all the other political elites.
That's pretty crazy. That's pretty nuts, right? That makes no sense. There's a huge, and it just, these things have been mishandled or they haven't been given the right energy or whatever. Anyway.
And me, little old me, right? Who has 4 children, born between 1994 and 2007 is the last one, right? Where the reason I wear Pick and Pay clothing things is because everything that I have been doing all my life has just been about taking care of these children and so on. And then you get into situations where it's like my boy who was born in 1994 is a born free and therefore should not really be considered as someone who comes from previously disadvantaged. You've come across this, right? And even the last one who was born in 2007. So a child who's born now in 2025 in Manguzi, somewhere in northern KwaZulu-Natal, versus a child who's born in Bryanston on historical privilege, right? Whatever you want to call it. Is there any equivalence? Is that child who's born in Manguzi someone who does not deserve consideration as previously disadvantaged? Because you are talking about Patrice Motsepe, so I'm just taking it a level further. So I have now gone through and I've gone to corporate and I have done things and I'm on television, I'm on radio. Does that apply to me as well? Does that apply to you?
To an extent.
What extent?
To the extent that I went to private school, which gave me a particular kind of access
Yes.
to education and international study opportunities. I became a Rotary Youth Exchange Scholar at 16 to go to the United States. Nelson Mandela was released a month after I went to the United States.
In
So I was
January
16.
1990.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because I'm class of 89.
Yeah.
And I remember the people asking me.
But wouldn't you have been turning 18 in 1990? We're the same age.
So 17. When I'm 18.
17. Okay, cool. Yeah.
I know. See, I've forgotten my thought now.
Sorry. No. But you're talking about the opportunities that you got.
Yes.
So Mandela,
it completely gave me all sorts of opportunities that I would have never even imagined in my life.
Yeah.
And there was a time when, in terms of affirmative action and BEE, where it seemed like the intent was to really be good. Like it was the right idea. But like you say, like the handling of the situations became so bad that now it makes that look like a bad idea. Whereas you need to always be addressing the imbalances of the past.
Yes.
So there's things that I've got advantages over, but I can never be equal to the kids that I went to Rodin with.
Yeah.
I will never.
I think if you talk about what is the issue, the issue is an issue of unfairness. So what are we talking about? We're going, society's been unfair. I mean, that's a very mild way to put it, but if why has this person got this thing and this person hasn't got this thing, right?
Yeah.
How do you address that sense of unfairness? We just want life to be fair, right? That is the conundrum. That is the problem that we have. That is how do we make life fair? It's the problem of the world, right? The world has the same problem to some degree, that everybody's wrestling to some degree with the same.
Yeah.
British society has been very skewed to landed gentry and kings and queens and people, very few people with a lot of money. These are not new problems.
Yeah.
I mean, we understand the history of a bunch of guys come across the sea and take stuff from us and then never go away. That's the difference. Yeah, right. But in essence, how do we make a fair society? And part of that stuff is why. God, I'm sounding like a lecturer again. But I mean, part of that stuff is just about we don't have dialogues. We don't have. Where are these public spaces where people feel? People attack each other on social media in stupid ways, or people go to debates and make somebody else feel embarrassed for coming there, or like it's very hostile. Public spaces have become very hostile, and I have a certain sympathy for why that might have happened and why people might be upset with other people. But unless as people that are genuinely interested in trying to create, let me just say, a fair society, we can't do that unless there is that sense. How do you make people aware of their privilege in a way that they can hear you? There's got to be some level of conversation about it, because they've got to be able to, if they feel like you're attacking them, they're not going to listen to you, right? And I feel like all of those opportunities, as we've got into the silos of our echo chambers and stuff, have gone. Like, when last did you hear a politician being interviewed on the radio? Like, they don't do it anymore because there's nothing in it for it. So we all have retreated in some ways away from these conversations, right? Because
they are uncomfortable and they're confrontational and it's not always pretty. But you ask, how do we solve the problem? For me, the crisis is around this stupid, unfair system that we've adopted.
Yeah.
Capitalism. To say this. And when you say that, I hate when people say, like, so what, you are a communist? It's such a simplistic way of saying the opposite of capitalism is communism. which it kind of isn't. There has to be very different ways of being able to measure a society. There have to be different ways for people to engage in business so that one doesn't become a billionaire and the rest die of poverty, can hardly feed themselves, can hardly afford to live where they live. It
makes no sense.
The system
There
makes no
is a
sense.
spectrum between hard capitalism and communism, and there are so many other
Thank you.
solutions.
You
in
said it better than I
between.
could. Yeah.
Like there's just so many other things that you could soften up capitalism where it really doesn't then become an issue of if I win, I win. I win. There's got to be some. But Robbie is actually, I think, on the money when he says, I think what he's saying to us is what he's contributing here is we are not accounting enough for just basic human nature. Humans are just naturally selfish. We look out for ourselves. And if I have got, and we're sitting here, I could be sitting here and I've got 20 million bucks. Do you think you're going to get any of that money?
Hell yeah. I'm counting on it.
You hope so.
That's my retirement plan. Didn't I tell you? Oops, sorry.
So so I hear you. I hear what you're saying about the difficulty of, I used the phrase earlier, the seeding of privilege. And I think that what we tried to do from the 1990s, particularly during Mbeki's term, was to really push the whole agenda of employment equity, legislate for it.
Grow the middle
Affirmative
class.
action,
Yeah.
grow the middle class, create enough black people who are comfortable. And I'm not, when I think about the question that I asked you guys before, I walk around the average township. The average township nowadays is significantly more affluent than it was in the 1980s.
Sure.
Every house has got a car. Every car is electrified. People in there have got cell phones, and they, you walk around any township right now, you could be anywhere,
Which segues nicely
Yeah.
into what I want to bring up for you.
Yeah.
So, one of the things I love about Robbie is that a few years ago he went to London and he went to the Monty Python shop.
Of course, he's the Monty Python
Of
nerd.
obviously, he's a Monty Python fan. And we bond over Easter because it's our birthday. Happy birthday for last week. It's our birthday. 2 days apart.
Oh, so he's the 9th.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, but
9/11. We 9/11.
I'm the 11th, he's the 9th.
Yeah.
And he bought me a t-shirt from The Life of Brian.
Your favorite Monty Python movie of all time.
Of all time. And I love that t-shirt so much. It just doesn't fit anymore.
He's
So
not
I'm
the
gonna
Messiah.
He's just a naughty boy. And that's exactly what the t-shirt says. He's not the Messiah. He's just a naughty boy. I thought about wearing it this morning, but then I didn't have it because it's at my place versus at my mom's.
Yeah.
And which segues nicely into religion. You talked earlier about going for black rituals, so to speak. Yeah, going with the sangoma.
Chicken bath.
Ooh, and we must talk later about it. I have such issues.
Yeah.
Chicken baths
Yeah.
and all of that. Where do you place yourself on the religious spectrum? Because are you agnostic? Are you atheist? Do you believe in something? Do you still see a sangoma once in a while, or did you leave that all behind? Because I know for a fact you're not.
No,
Christian.
I had a long relationship with it. As you know, that
Yeah.
Sangoma, I traveled the road, and it was a very interesting experience for me because, I got something out of it at the end.
You're ahead of me, by the way.
You
And I'm a Zulu boy.
you got to have enough space in your togetherness to allow the winds of the heavens to blow through, right?
And can
there's something in everything. To dismiss anything, people make science into religion because it becomes a doctrine. It's only this stuff that counts. Well, that's just a religious approach to science.
Right.
Whereas actual science is very much about theory, which is not fact, or ideas, or science is a big thing too. And it does, the idea of it is to explain everything, just like religion. The idea of it is to try and explain everything.
Science has got far more questions than answers.
Yeah, far more questions. Has to have, right? Has to have. And if you understand that, it's important to understand that because people seem to be, like they are with religion, seem to be very narrow about science. But can I say, this is not going to answer. So I don't know if that's an answer, but let me, and I've got a whole weird childhood with religion, which I'm not going to go into because we don't have time. But,
Next episode.
But let me say this about a thing, because why I think dialogue and meeting people outside of your bubble in some ways is important, because I did touch on it earlier, but maybe let me just finish the point. I had this moment in which I worked in a hardware store for 10 Rand on a Saturday. And there was this guy called Rasta, right? And this is in the 1970s. And he had the beginnings of dreads. Now, that guy, can you imagine how brave he was?
Yeah.
Because he was drawing attention to himself.
Yep.
At a time in which people would just be disappeared off the streets or picked up for bullshit or whatever. He's basically going around saying, I smoke dope and I don't give a fuck what you think about me or whatever he's saying. He's making a political statement, but he's saying. And as I said, he quoted Muhammad Ali, but he had this thing about Bob Marley. He would talk to me about Bob Marley, and I'd never heard of Bob Marley. Right? So at a point in which I was old enough, and Rasta had left my life, but I was old enough to get on a bus and go to Johannesburg and go to the Indian record store called Kohinoor and get.
I remember that. Yes,
a Bob Marley album called Rastaman Vibration, which had a Hessian cover, which apparently was good for crushing your especially designed to crush your marijuana on.
I did not know.
Yeah, that's why it was there.
It's called Hessian.
I didn't know either, of course. And I got this very prized possession, and I went back and I listened to this thing like it was a religious moment for me to hear these words, right? And Rastaman starts with Rastaman Vibration, very joyous music, very joyous music. Like that had such an impact on me of like, anyway. But there's a song on there called War, right? Until the philosophy that says that one race is inferior and another is superior is completely and utterly discredited and abandoned, there'll be war. That was life-changing. That absolutely changed my life. Just hearing those words and sung in that way and all of that stuff. That was my politics.
There was Israel and Palestine.
That's everything. That's just that and
that's South Africa.
That's South Africa.
And in that moment, in some ways, and this is a very romantic version of that, of it. But in that moment, I knew that I wasn't going to go and fight in the SADF, and nobody told me that. But that's where I got that from. I realized, okay, I can. There's another way. There are people in the world that think differently to my immediate thing. I just have to go and find them.
You mentioned this, and there's a part of my heart that just died thinking of all the things that I was criticizing about our government. Like, it kills me that we're raising kids in schools where they don't have arts education. And I'm talking about public schools. Obviously, in private schools there are, which should be every child's right.
Key thing.
You talked about we need to push artists in as many different spheres of our society as is humanly possible. Our children cannot play a music instrument. Our children don't even have a soccer field, for God's sakes, or a netball field. So they're very limited in terms of what kind of sports that they'll be exposed to. So the reason why Bafana sucks, quite frankly, is because we're not still able to get to
we killed school football. We killed it. Because Dr. Kumalo used to play against Shuz Mushwe when they were in Standard 8.
Right.
Dr. Kumalo, Brian Baloyi and Jerry Skosana, they met in Alex and whatever and Tembisa. But I wanted to ask you, because you were talking about Rastaman and you talked about this whole romantic notion. One of the things that people always say, language is sexually transmittable. And the only reason I speak any Sesotho at all is because I'm married to a woman who's half Mopedi and half Motswana, because I have to speak with her, in those languages. We're talking about all of this. And this is purely out of my curiosity. And this is for both of you. The first time you crossed the color line, When
It was
was it? Do you
very
remember?
exciting.
Oh, yeah. I
and,
remember very specifically.
Oh yeah.
do you remember?
Oh, yeah.
Don't
What-
you? Do you remember?
Of course I do.
Yeah.
Of course I remember her name.
I mean, Yeovil. Yeovil
Yeah.
offered many opportunities for me in my life. But just talking, if you don't mind, just talking about the importance, because it's close to my heart, of social politics, if that's the correct word, the idea of culture and what culture can do, as opposed to politics of which we can't agree on. But so in my later life, going to the Market Theatre, once I was old enough, I was out of the house and watching Barney Simon, Black Dog Injanyama, talking about what was happening in the country, right? It was this weird sort of thing that they allowed plays to happen because nobody was watch them, right? So few people would ever watch them, and I guess they could say, you see, we are a free society, whatever. But or watching John Carney and Master Harold and the Boys, watching it on stage. And what a massive impact that had on me, because it was my window into Black life. Like I saw a slither, a something of Black life. Which was amazing. It was a window into something really important for me. And, that's why I really believe that's where we need to also focus, is like, how do we culturally bring people together? Where are the meeting points of things that, and it's boring. The rugby thing is boring because there's it's a different thing. But culturally, just being able to have had the privilege of all of those things and the difference they've made on my life, and I hope they're still happening. I mean, I'm sure they are in some ways. But as you say, where's it in the schools? We focus on the wrong things.
Swangile Kumalo once said to me, the songstress, and I actually went and looked it up afterwards. She said to me, there have been definitive studies that have shown that when children learn music and learn an instrument, it actually improves their mathematics.
Yeah.
It does.
Makes sense.
Because when you're playing the piano, you gotta count.
Right.
And I studied the theory of music. Remember when back in our time, I don't know if this was true with you, Standard 5, grade 7 was an external exam.
Yeah.
Yeah, it got taken to Pretoria.
Right.
I got 100% in the theory of music.
Damn.
It's one of my proudest things ever.
100%.
100% in the theory of
As it
music.
should be.
Amazing.
But
Okay, we're about to wrap up. I'm curious, Robbie, as to this has been a conversation all over the place. It's going to be interesting editing it, if at all. But any parting shots? Like, you asked us questions yourself. How do we feel about this country? And by the way, I don't tell this to many people, but Lundi is one of the best sangomas I've ever consulted with.
Yeah. And she was white. Yeah.
Crazy. And she was white.
Yeah.
Where I had to suspend my disbelief and be like,
I mean, like, those are questions that are so big. As I have every thought about this country all the time. I have great despair. I have great hope. My children live here, my family, my life. I don't have anything anywhere else. I've banked and bet my entire future on being in this country. And I've never imagined that it would be any other way. And, things could get a hell of a lot worse. And I would still be here, and I would still be, I would still always be optimistic. And I think the optimism really, for me, is, all of these big problems that we have that can make you feel small and insignificant are one thing, but I always come back to the people, and I always come back to how amazingly friendly the people of South Africa, through all the trauma and all of the stuff, how is it possible that if you take the time to spend some time with somebody in an authentic way, how rewarding it always is. And no matter where that person is from, if you just take the time.
Yeah. And investing in other people. I believe in building individual villages, you know, since we're being let down so much by the powers that be, that you build your village. In that village, children are educated. Make sure that children are not hungry. That people who deserve, and this is where you've been brilliant, the kind of manager that I've become, it's always about finding people of value in terms of their hunger for knowledge and their brilliance at the work that they do, and making sure that they succeed within a company. Giving people opportunities to be their best. You
Are
know,
you talking about you or me?
I'm talking about me, of course. Robbie discovered me, so to speak.
Oh God!
Yeah.
Don't make it sound like the Victoria
No, he did.
Falls.
And I realized that in this conversation, we actually haven't talked about the fact that you guys, for the longest time, you were partners at
Yes.
Yeah.
at Tom Pictures, because that's what Tom Pictures was, right?
Thorpe,
Thorpe,
Omotosho,
Omotosho.
Matsunyane.
It was like an amazing.
In
When
honor
I
of
first
Hyde.
met you guys, I just thought, what an amazing, like, here is this child of a Nigerian immigrant and this English guy, Thorpe, and this little Motswana woman, and they're just creating magic.
There's
'Cause
nothing little about me.
No, but it was,
I know,
for me, it was because you did, and I remember she asked me this question. She says to me, "What are you watching on South African TV?" And I remember saying to her, "Oh, I just think South African TV, like, serious." And she said, "Is there anything at all that you like?" And I didn't even know that Tom Pictures was producing, what was your Sorted. And I said to him, "There's this thing I keep watching. I can't stop watching this thing, Sorted." And you guys actually created it, eh?
Yep. Robbie Thorpe and Craig Fremont, to be specific.
Yeah.
And I will definitely say one of the best South African series to ever come out of here.
Yeah.
You know, see, this is the thing.
Nominated for an Emmy.
Nominated for an international.
And she went, I
Emmy.
remember she actually went to the
Remember?
Emmys.
Yes.
I remember. I just met you and you had to go
Yeah.
to,
Yeah, completely. That's why I embarrassed myself. So I asked him what he wants from the States. So there used to be Tower Records.
Yes.
And then it became Virgin.
Yes.
So I go into Virgin. And, hi ma'am, can we help you? And I'm like, yes. Do we have Belle Biv DeVoe?
What?
Belle Biv DeVoe.
Oh yeah.
And what was the name?
Something in Your Eyes.
No. But the name of the album.
Was it not Poison? What was it?
It is a very...
Yeah. But
remember,
I remember.
So that one
Belle
is
Biv
in
DeVoe,
there.
Yeah.
Do you know that the guy behind the counter laughed at me? He was just kind of like, what? You're looking for that song? Like that album. But I did ultimately find it. And when I did, I was so glad that I did. I don't know. This conversation is kind of, it has been all over the place, but I'm glad because I wanted to have a conversation. I encourage everybody, talk to your white friends. Maybe we're not honest enough. Maybe we don't think the other people are ready to hear what we've got to hear. Talk with a little bit of patience, with a little bit of cajoling. But I want the conversations to continue because it doesn't help when we get into our racist silos about what we think about
and
other
let them
people.
know that you're not happy. I think that's a really important. I'm serious. I'm serious.
Yeah.
Let them know you're not let them know what you're not happy about.
And the thing again, you just use the R word, racism and so on, is that one of the things for me, one of the greatest epiphanies that I had in my life is the day I realized that racism was actually never going to die. It was never going to get obliterated. For as long as people see the difference in color, racism is just one of those things like diabetes, like your gout, like it's a lifestyle disease.
We're managing it.
Just manage it.
Yeah.
Just manage it. But you guys ran away from the question,
Which was?
like my issues with racism. A lot of things were answered when I could have pillow talk with a white person. And I was like, when I was like, you think that?
Right.
And then you have those conversations. They were the deepest conversations I ever had. So thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Catherine.
I didn't understand. Sorry, I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
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 Was it like that for me?
Mm.
The first one was just kind of like exploratory. You know what I mean? Where you think
Curiosity.
and also where you think you're being revolutionary.
When I met her, she was married to a white man. You know, I don't know how many people know
That's why
that.
I asked the question.
Nobody knows that.
I did not want to be the one to
Okay,
out
that's
it.
getting cut out.
No, it's okay. I'm not embarrassed about it. One of the best men I've ever met in my life. But that is a whole other matter for another episode. Robbie Thorpe, thank you so much for joining
Thank you
us.
for having me.
Dumiso Ngobo, always a pleasure. And we will see you on the socials. Talk to us. We will eventually come back and to talk to you. Until next time, see you then.